Hey YouTube, it's Nancy with T-Cell Logic. Today we go to Boston, Massachusetts to go over the case of Su Taraskiewicz. Su Taraskiewicz had dreams of one day becoming a cartoonist. She was obsessed with the character Snoopy from the comic strip Peanuts gang. And in 1992, she was lucky enough to meet the Charles Schulz, the creator of the Peanuts gang comic strip. Su graduated from high school in 1987 and began working for Northwest Airlines at Logan International Airport in Boston, Massachusetts. Susan Su Taraskiewicz was born on February 13, 1965. She had two siblings, a brother and a sister, and she grew up in Saugus, Massachusetts. So after high school, Su went to Salem State College, North Shore Community College, and then Massachusetts College of the Arts. She was very artistic, very creative, and she was also athletic. Back in the day, it wasn't very common for females to be working for airlines, especially out on the ground, if you will. And Su totally defied this gender stereotype. She worked as a ground crew supervisor for Northwest Airlines. Su originally worked as a cleaner where she would clean the interior of aircrafts, and after 3 years, she was promoted to ramp supervisor, and she was the first woman ever to hold that position at Logan International Airport. Su seemed to really like her job at the airport, and when she was promoted to ramp supervisor, her coworkers, which were mostly men, were kind of uncomfortable with the fact that they would have a female supervisor. Originally, another coworker had bid on that position illegally, and Su was pretty upset about this. Naturally, one would be. So she filed a grievance and ended up winning that grievance and was awarded a promotion with back pay. That also made her coworkers super uncomfortable, and as a result, she was often harassed on the job by her male coworkers. On September 12, 1992, during the third shift, Su volunteered to go and get her and her coworkers some sandwiches for their lunch hour. Before going to pick up the sandwiches, Su had received a call from an unknown person who wanted to meet with her. It must have been someone she knew or felt comfortable with because she never mentioned this call to anyone, so it didn't seem that it was anything bad. But then again, maybe she just didn't say anything because her male coworkers weren't exactly her buddies. But nonetheless, she didn't mention it. After leaving to go get the sandwiches, Su never returned, and not one of her coworkers reported her missing on that day. Instead, what one of her coworkers did was manually clock her out, and then the next day, at the beginning of her shift, manually clocked her in, which is really weird because no one said anything about the sandwiches the night before. I don't know about you, but if it were me, I would be waiting for those sandwiches for my lunch hour. I don't know about you, but if it were me, I would have said something if those sandwiches had never shown up for lunch. Because, it's lunchtime, people are hungry. When the food doesn't show up, usually someone says something because that's what they're going to eat, right? It's pretty simple, but no one said anything about the sandwiches never arriving, which is extremely odd. That, combined with the fact that someone manually clocked her out and then in the next morning, flashes all kinds of red flags. On the night that Su went to go get sandwiches, she had originally clocked in at 11 p.m. She went to pick up the sandwiches at about 1 a.m. And after 36 hours, the police began searching for her. And after searching for her for about 2 days, they ended up finding her. The car was found in the town of Revere, which is not too far from the airport, parked at an A1 auto body shop. Her body was discovered inside of the trunk of her car, and she had been badly beaten, stabbed, and strangled. Sue lived at home with her parents, but since she worked the third shift, she was often out of the house when her family was home. Her mom, Marlene, says that they usually only saw each other in passing, but Marlene always knew when Sue was home because she would leave a pile of her dirty clothes for Marlene to wash on Sundays. September 14th, Marlene did not see that heap of clothing that Sue would usually leave out, but she didn't really think much of it. She thought that maybe she was just working overtime and that she, just didn't get a chance to leave her dirty laundry there because she would have been at work. She didn't really think much of it until the next day when Deborah, Sue's sister, had called Marlene, her mother, to let her know that one of her coworkers had called her to let her know that she had not shown up for her scheduled shift, and no one had seen or heard from Sue. When Sue's coworker called Deborah, they mentioned that they had not seen Sue since her shift on Saturday night, and the coworker urged her and her family to contact police. Marlene left her job and went straight to the police department to report her daughter missing. Earlier that day, someone called police after seeing blood coming from a parked blue Toyota Tercel. After Marlene gave the police chief Sue's name, he sat her down and gave her the bad news that they had found Sue in her vehicle and that she had been murdered. On that Saturday, Sue was scheduled to work 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And her mother recalls that Saturday before work, Sue had some girls over that night so that they could go over wedding stuff since her sister was going to get married upcoming February. While they were together, Marlene did notice that Sue seemed kind of irate, and she didn't really seem to be enjoying herself. She just seemed kind of upset with something, and something about her just didn't seem right. Towards the end of their get-together, Sue said something along the lines of, "I have to get to work. I know they're going to give me a hard time, but I gotta do it," referring to her coworkers at the airport. One of Sue's coworkers, Deborah, who is a different Deborah, recalls one time that she and Sue had a meeting with higher-ups over at Northwest Airlines, and apparently that meeting did not go very well. Sue began to cry after the meeting and had told Deborah that she was scared, but never really elaborated as to why or who she was scared of. After 1 year of speculating what it is could have happened to Sue, thinking that maybe it was just a random attack, in 1993, her family discovered diaries in her room, which pointed to a more sinister reason behind her death. In her diary, Sue had written about the humiliating sexual harassment that she had experienced at her work by her coworkers. An example of some of the harassment she received were things like drawings. At one time, there was a large drawing on the inside of a luggage hold depicting Miss Taraskiewicz naked with her legs spread. There was threatening graffiti in the men's room and in the cargo hold. She started receiving threatening phone calls in the middle of the night, and her car had been vandalized. And anyone that would show support for Sue or defended her also had their car vandalized and started receiving threats. It was clear that there was someone or some individuals that did not like Sue or just felt extremely threatened by her. Even though Sue tried to do the right thing by going to upper management harassment report, they didn't really do much to help her or stop the harassment, and it continued, and it got worse. Soon after her promotion, Sue had found a large graffiti drawing of a coffin with her name on it, which is so unsettling. No one should ever have to deal with any kind of harassment that way, and I'm just appalled that no one at her workplace would have done anything to help her feel comfortable at her own job. One of the assaults Sue experienced at work involved Robert Brooks. Robert and Sue didn't really speak to each other much, but earlier in time they had a sexual relationship, and on one occasion they got into a really big argument because Robert had broken Sue's radio at work. He had actually broken it 2 different times. After this happened, Sue had asked her then boyfriend to talk to Robert about getting her a new radio. This only made Robert even more mad about the whole situation, and the next time she spoke with him, he threatened to kill her boyfriend. In April of 1989, Sue attempted to break up a fight between Joseph and 2 other employees. This only made Joseph mad, of course. Joseph ended up calling Sue a effing CUT. This ordeal ended with Joseph being put on a 6-month suspension by Northwest Airlines. Not because of anything Sue did, but because of his own actions. Either way, Joseph blamed Sue for what was happening to him, of course. And while Joseph was out on a no-pay suspension, instead of backing down and thinking about how he could become a better person when he returned to work, he instead went out and keyed Sue's car. He slashed her tires, stalked her, staked out her house, made anonymous phone calls to her, and told others that he would get back at Sue for what he perceived she had done to him, even though his suspension was based on his actions, not Sue's. Sometime later, it was revealed by Robert that Joseph had indeed blamed Sue for his no-pay suspension, and he wasn't fond of her at all. He really did not like her. After Joseph returned back to work from his suspension, he and a few of the other baggage handlers began to steal credit cards from mail bags at Southwest Airlines. They would take thousands of credit cards, using some of them to make unauthorized transactions, and others they would just sell. Robert and Joseph would occasionally go out shopping using the stolen credit card. Other times he would just work as a lookout for Joseph while stealing credit cards. Robert claims that he never stole any of the credit cards, that it was mostly Joseph doing the stealing. It wasn't long before officials started catching on to the credit card theft. And in 1991, there was an investigation into the credit card scheme. No one outside the investigation knew about this investigation until about August 4th, 1992, when several of the baggage handlers at Northwest received subpoenas from a Boston-based federal grand jury known as the Credit Card Grand Jury. Members of this credit card ring, including Joseph, wondered if someone had snitched on them from the baggage handlers. Joseph was convinced that Sue had something to do with this, and he referred to her as a rat. 2 days later, Joseph was fired, and a few weeks later, Sue was found dead. 2 days later, Joseph was fired, and a few weeks later, Sue was found unalive. When police found Sue, they suspected that her death When police found Sue, they suspected that her passing might have been connected to the federal investigation of Northwest Airlines that took place not long before she had passed on. Robert ended up moving out of the area to Minnesota before Sue had passed on. But this would not stop his name from coming up during the credit card investigation and Sue's passing. Joseph was eventually found guilty and convicted on various charges stemming from the credit card scheme. Robert ended up being charged with perjury because while being under oath, Robert had claimed that he hadn't spoken with Joseph the night that Sue passed away and that he was in Minnesota. Well, those statements were found to be false. He had actually spoken to Joseph the night that Sue had passed on. It's interesting that Robert would have spoken with Joseph the night that Sue had passed on because Robert was out in Minnesota on a trip or he'd moved there, something along those lines. So he really wouldn't have had a reason to be speaking with Joseph if it didn't have something to do with Sue. And any relationship that Robert and Joseph had, and the times that Robert and Joseph did hang out, they often talked about Sue and their dislike of Sue. It's very suspicious that they were on the phone that night that she passed away. I wonder what they were talking about. Joseph and Robert continue to be the prime suspects, and it goes without saying. They both disliked Sue. They were jealous of her. They hated the fact that she was the boss and they had to listen to her. They used her as a scapegoat. Anything that went wrong at work was automatically Sue's fault. If they got in trouble or were talked to about something, it was probably Sue. It was a very unhealthy attitude to have towards an individual. It seems that they kind of bonded over their dislike of Sue. So what exactly could have happened to Sue? Well, she went out and got sandwiches. She never came back. No one at work said anything about the sandwiches never coming. So it almost seems like they were all in on it, or maybe it was just a couple of them that were in on it. Mostly Joseph, because Robert wasn't even there. He was in Minnesota. But mostly Joseph. Maybe at some point he said, okay, they canceled the sandwich order. Forget about it. Find something else to eat. And possibly lied about, Sue not coming back and Sue asking someone to clock her out. Those are just things I'm speculating. Personally, just based on what I've read, definitely feel that they had something to do with Sue passing away. That's just how toxic they were, that they would just not leave her alone. They wouldn't let her live her life in peace. They wouldn't let her just go to work and get her work done and let her go home. They had to butt into her life. They had to make her feel miserable and humiliate her at work, and eventually possibly have something to do with her life being cut short. And it is just such a shame that not enough was done to help Sue with what she was having to deal with at work. Sue didn't have anything to do with the credit card scheme being discovered. Sue did not have anything to do with them being caught in the whole credit card scheme ordeal. She was not the one who reported them. And it's pretty dumb that they think they would never get caught, because that's a pretty huge crime. And I'm sure they were able to track a lot of those credit cards, or it just seems like something of that nature would be discovered pretty quickly, especially when you're stealing thousands of credit cards. Hey guys, here I am on a different day. I don't know what happened to the ending of that video, but that's the end of it. And I just wanted to say thank you for watching. Stay safe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And thank you for watching. Have a good one.